Weird Fighting Games is about covering unknown and obscure fighting games, but it's also about covering games you may have just ignored. Today's game definitely fits that criteria. What happens when you cross BlazBlue, Soul Calibur, and Fate Stay Night? You get today's game, Fate Unlimited Codes. Welcome to Weird Fighting Games, Episode 7. The year is 2003, and development of Fate Stay Night is wrapping up. Fate was unlike anything else Type Moon had put out at the time. It had epic battles, engaging characters, and rich world building. Looking at what they had, Type Moon co-founder Takashi Takeuchi thought Fate would be a perfect fit for a fighting game, and his fellow co-founder Kanoko Nasu agreed. Little did they know, Fate Stay Night would become one of, if not the most popular visual novels in existence, or so the story goes. A lot of what I'm going off of is taken from an interview in the Type Moon magazine, Type Moon Ace. I tried to track down a copy of this issue, volume 2 specifically, to confirm, but this is one of the issues that's really hard to get a hold of. The only ones I could find were extremely expensive, a purchase I could not justify, and I couldn't find scans anywhere on the internet, so I'm gonna have to trust Wikipedia on this one. Update. I did actually find scans of this magazine, but I soon realized that I was about to fall into a whole nother rabbit hole, which we do not have time for today. The article itself is almost 8 pages long. That's biting off way more than I can chew. I'll get to this one day, but not today, so we'll have to continue trusting Wikipedia. 2007 rolls around, and Type Moon approaches Kaguya, a developer who was known for making games based off of popular anime franchises and the Drakengard series, to make a fighting game under the supervision of Capcom. Type Moon was not messing around. They were getting the best of the best to work on this game, and the people who worked on Drakengard, to bring the action-packed fights of Fate off the page and into the arcade. They would go on to release one of the most technically advanced, innovative, and honestly, breathtaking games to ever grace the genre. I'm of course talking about the cult classic fighter, Fate Tiger Coliseum. Fate Tiger Coliseum is a weird fighting game, but I won't be covering it today. All you need to know is this game paved the way for what was to come next. Kaguya releases Tiger Coliseum and Type Moon likes it, so they start developing the next fighting game. But due to financial issues Kaguya was facing at the time, development had to be halted. Development would then resume that same year, but without Kaguya at the helm. Instead, development would be transferred over to Aiding, the people who would go on to make Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and most recently, DNF Duel. With an experienced developer at the helm, the project proceeded smoothly, and after 2 years of development, Fate Unlimited Codes would be summoned into arcades.
フェイト Unlimited Code.
Released on June 11th, 2008, Fate Unlimited Codes ran on the Namco System 246, a arcade board that has similar architecture to the PlayStation 2. This arcade board is home to all-time classics like Soul Calibur 2 and Tekken 5. The biggest advantage to being on this arcade board was specifically it was extremely easy to port a game from the arcade to the PlayStation, which is evident with how soon the console version was released, coming out only 6 months later, in December of 2008. Fate Unlimited Codes released with two versions, a standard version you could get for regular retail price, or a special Saber Lily edition which came with a figure of Saber Lily. Saber Lily is an alternate outfit that they liked so much they were going to make it so the only way to get it was to buy this edition. Thankfully, they didn't do that. Also, I found this picture of an arcade stick, which was likely released to promote the game. Couldn't really find any info on it, but I got a nice little kick out of it. Booting the game up, the first thing you'll notice is the art style. It's insanely close to Takeuchi's art style. During development, they were given strict guidelines that needed to be adhered to, guaranteeing it looked as close to the source material as possible. It definitely paid off because the game looks amazing. For this episode, I'm running an imported copy on a PlayStation 2 emulator with a number of graphical improvements, and it still holds up for a decade-old game. Although, I do feel at some angles, heads look really weird. Being a 3D game, the developers are also able to include some alternate outfits. I think my favorite is Saber's casual outfit. It just looks really nice in 3D, and the skirt animations are really top-notch. Actually, all of the cloth animations on the characters are extremely well done. Most of the time in games, clothes are handled in three ways. Either they're static and unchanging, the easiest method. Have some kind of physics behind them, which can have varying levels of success or lack thereof. And the third is to animate the clothing with the character, which takes the most effort. I'm not 100%, but it seems Fate Unlimited Codes chose option 3. While we're on the topic of animations, all of them are top-notch. You can tell a lot of care went into making these animations look the best they could, and it shows. Like any fighting game from the mid-2000s, Unlimited Codes has the modes you'd expect. There is a story in the arcade mode of the game, but it's heavily condensed, and most of them aren't really canon. They were written by Nasu, which is pretty cool, but he apparently expressed disappointment that the stories couldn't be more in-depth. And at first I was like, what is this guy talking about? It's a fighting game. Fighting games don't have stories. But, you know, I totally forgot that this is the guy who just a couple of years earlier in 2002 released a fighting game with a 6-hour visual novel in it. So I totally understand Nasu's disappointment. He probably wanted to make another visual novel to put in the game, but I guess it wasn't meant to be. Things get interesting when we get to the game's mission mode. Mission mode has your basic combo trials that you've seen in any fighter. What stands out are the EX missions, which are a selection of mini-games that are just off the walls. One has you fighting skeletons like a 3D brawler, but then in the next one you're running away from the Berserker, but then it's a 2D beat 'em up like Final Fight and you gotta beat up the skeletons again. But then it's a rhythm game and you have to parry the skeletons. But then it's just an entire level of a shoot 'em up game with power-ups and everything. But then it's an eating simulator where you have to eat the spicy food by mashing the analog stick like it owes you money. You have to eat it at a good tempo or you won't be able to finish your meal because it's just too spicy. I don't get it. Just don't eat the spicy food. I had a smile on my face the entire time I was playing these. My favorite is Lancers because you have to kick Shiro near the shed where he summons Saber. And I was like, hey, I remember reading that part and now I get to do the kicking. That's cool. While they don't amount to anything more than a simple distraction, I'll never forget this game because of them. And I can't help but admire the extra effort that had to go into programming these little mini games and debugging them, because you can't just make something like this and put it into a game. If you put something like this into a game, people have to test this. So they're like, oh, I'm gonna test the fighting game. No, you have to test the mini game where Rin and the other girl slap each other and you have to get a good high score. That's what you're testing today. This is a fighting game though, so how's the gameplay? Fate Unlimited Codes is a 2.5D fighter. The characters fight on a 2D plane, but you have the ability to sidestep left and right to avoid projectiles and attacks. It's a bit like Tekken or Soul Calibur in that way, but don't get it twisted. This game plays like a traditional 2D fighter with 3D fighting game elements sprinkled in there. There are 3 attack buttons, A, B, and C. They can be chained into each other like Marvel vs. Capcom or Guilty Gear pre-Strive. Additionally, there is a 3rd button. Apparently I can't count because that's the 4th button. Reflect Guard. Reflect Guard takes 25% meter to use, and if successful, you bounce the opponent's attack back, staggering them and allowing you to do one of 3 follow-ups. If this sounds familiar to you, it should, because it's very similar to Melty Blood type Lumina's shield system. They aren't one-to-one, but they come from a similar place. For example, both can be used against frame traps, although Reflect Guard is way more risky because the cost is higher. Also, Reflect can be used in combos as well, as you can use it to cancel attacks and extend your combos where you otherwise couldn't. Still, I think it's an insane coincidence that 2 Type Moon fighters, decades apart, have similar system mechanics. Actually, I have a theory that Lumina takes a lot of inspiration from this game, but I'll get back to that when I talk about the characters. Movement in this game is what you'd expect from an anime fighter, but there are 2 aspects that make unlimited codes stand out. For one, backdashes are frame 1 invincible and can be cancelled into sidestep, throw, special moves, and supers. With this many options, what is a traditionally defensive mechanic becomes one that can be used for offense or in any other way the player desires. The other unique movement technique is the ability to fast fall by holding down in the air. The fast fall in this game is truly versatile. You can use it multiple times as opposed to it being a one and done type of deal. This gives it interesting applications in both combos, mix-ups, and of course, moving around. The act of moving around is often underappreciated because it's hard for the untrained eye to tell when someone has good movement. It might not seem that exciting compared to combos, but having good movement is key when playing at a competitive level. And mechanics like fast fall and backdash cancelling in conjunction with the other movement mechanics make Fate, Unlimited Codes, have a really cool base for the fighting mechanics to build on top of. The meter in this game, or magic circuit, is segmented into 3 sections, each representing 100% of the meter. And of course, it wouldn't be an anime fighter if you didn't have 1,000,001 ways to use meters. Besides the Reflect Guard, which I mentioned earlier, you can use 200% meter for a burst like you'd have in any other fighter, 100 meter for a super, guard cancel while in block stun, or you could push block like Marvel vs. Capcom if you want to get them away, or you can use it to perform mana burst, or what the community calls activate. Performed by pressing all 3 attack buttons simultaneously, activate state changes based on how you've initiated it. If you activate it during a combo, you get offensive activate, which cancels your current action and lets you go for a bigger combo, or continue pressure. Also, you can cancel special moves into supers, making those big combos even more threatening. On the other hand, if you activate while not being hit or blocking, you get a defensive activate, which blows the opponent away and health regenerates for the duration of the activation. It's a lot like Heat from Melty Blood. The activate duration is based on how much meter you have at the time. More meter equals more time. If you activate with 300 meter, your character gets a character-specific special buff. For example, Saber, when she activates her special buff with 300 meter, unsheaths her sword and gets extra hit stun on all her attacks, while Shiro gets increased life regeneration on top of the base health generation Activate already provides. There is also a special kind of Activate, but before I explain that, I have to talk about Fate Unlimited Code's signature mechanic, The Holy Grail system. The entire mythos of Fate's Stay Night is centered around the Holy Grail of legend, and the war that takes place to claim it. The Holy Grail is the reason why servants are summoned into the world, and it's said that the one who wins the Grail War gets any wish they desire. It's a little more complicated than that, but I don't really have the time to explain the lore. Maybe next time. That being said, how did aiding translate the Holy Grail concept into a fighting game? I'm sure you've noticed it by now, but there is a Grail icon in the middle of the screen. The Grail is filled after a combo is completed. Eventually, the Grail will be filled and one player will enter Grail Advantage. If the player activates with 300% meter, they can claim the Holy Grail and gain access to their most powerful attack. Noble Phantasms for servants, and signature techniques for masters. This attack is guaranteed to do a set amount of damage regardless of scaling, so if you're on the receiving end of a Grail super, it's most likely GG's. Once the Grail is claimed, it cannot be claimed again for the rest of the round. This leads to some interesting decision making on both players' parts. Do you try to claim the Grail as fast as possible so your opponent can't take advantage of it? Or should you wait for the opportune moment and risk the Grail being claimed by your opponent? There is no easy answer. You could also choose to drain your opponent's meter by using the universal meter draining special, which upon successful hit drains half a bar of your opponent's meter. Despite being in 3D, combos in this game are like any other anime fighter. Stylish, extremely long, and high execution. Now, not every combo is hard to do, but if you want to do some of the more advanced ones, you're definitely going to have to put the time into learning. You can totally play this game by learning the basic ABC launcher combo and have a ton of fun. Prevalent in a lot more advanced combos are loops. Loops are exactly what they sound like, a combo that has a portion of itself looped X number of times until the combo drops, or ends. I'll be honest, I do not like loops, they're boring to watch, and being hit by one isn't that exciting either. It definitely takes some skill to pull them off, but I can't help but be bored to tears whenever I see one. Another noteworthy aspect of combos in this game is the Tiger Knee. Tiger Kneeing is the act of performing a special move motion and pressing up. This makes you perform your attack as soon as you leave the ground. In Fate Unlimited codes, not only can you Tiger Knee moves, but you can cancel moves from Tiger Kneeing. This technique is known as Tiger Knee canceling. It sounds way more confusing than it actually is. Here's an example I found from a guide. Rin's 623A special move can only be jump cancelled. You can't do another attack. If you want to do a follow-up, you gotta jump. However, if you input an attack during the jump startup, the jump will be cancelled into that attack. If Rin Tiger Knees her 623A special move and inputs 623C right after the initial special before she jumps, she'll be able to combo these two moves together, creating a combo that should be impossible to do. One more aspect of Unlimited Code's combo system I want to shine some light on is a technique simply called unscale. When watching match footage for this episode, a term I heard constantly thrown around was unscale. Unscale, to put it simply, is a bug that lets supers do their full damage at the end of a combo. Usually as a combo goes on, each successive hit does less damage. So say a super does 500 damage raw. If you did that super after a 50 hit combo, it'd do way less than 500 damage because of combo scaling, which differs from fighting game to fighting game. It's one of those universal rules almost every fighting game has agreed on. Unlimited Codes is no different. Do super at the end of a combo and get less damage. This might not sound like a big deal, but when you do the optimal combos in this game, which can last for minutes at worst and have crazy high hit counts, you're not getting a lot of bang for your buck if you cash out with a super, unless of course you use this technique. With this technique, supers will always do 100% of their damage regardless of their placement in combos. To perform this technique, you simply have to have a projectile on the stage, then super, and the super will hit for its full damage. This makes it so characters who have projectiles have an objective advantage over those who don't. You'll find a lot of unintentional mechanics like these in older fighters. Not because they're programmed worse, it's just that modern fighting games are scrutinized a lot more. With the rise of competitive circuits for even the smallest of games, mechanics like these would probably get patched out or worked into the system in a more organic way. In a way, it's a double-edged sword, because I find these intricacies give older games distinct identity. I can't help but feel that the modern fighter plays it too safe at the expense of trying something new, although I can't really blame them. I spent a lot of time on the gameplay this time, but I truly wanted to show you what makes Fate Unlimited Codes different from other fighting games. That's just the fighting mechanics though. A game can have the best mechanics in the world, but they're worth nothing if you don't have cool and interesting characters to play as. Fate Unlimited Codes has 17 playable characters, 14 from Fate Stay Night, 2 from Fate Hollow Atraxia, and 1 from Fate Zero. It's a respectable roster for a fighting game and a Fate game, but I think they got all of the important characters, although I do wish Soichiro Kuzuki was in the game because he's one of my favorite characters, but I guess Kotomine and Bazette already fill his gameplay niche, so having another brawler in the roster would have been redundant. I'd like to take this time to highlight some of the characters and what makes them interesting. Shiro has tools to fight long range and play rushdown, while not excelling in either area. He fights hand to hand in this game, which I found strange since for most of Fate he uses that strengthened practice sword. He has a super that is a bit unorthodox. It does more damage on block than on hit, and it actually activates the cinematic if they block it. I've never seen anything like this before, and it's really creative. In his other super, he uses projection magic to manifest Saber's sword, and during it, you get to see his magic circuits opening up just like they do in the visual novel. It's a nice detail. Saber is, of course, still Saber, who fights using her saber. She's a Rekka character in this game and can be slippery with her forward advancing specials, and her command backdash, which can be cancelled from her regular backdash, letting her bob and weave through the neutral. Of course, it wouldn't be Saber without her trademark, Excalibur. Hold on a minute though, because remember when I said way back in the beginning of the video, I have a theory that Lumina takes a lot of inspiration from this game, but I'll get back to that. So we're getting back to that. Lumina Saber and Unlimited Code Saber have very similar movesets. Both have Rekkas, both have command backdashes, both have the exact same uppercut special, and they share the same exact 3 supers down to the animation. Her last arc and Grail supers are also extremely similar. You might not know this, but the reason why Saber is in Melty in the first place was because French Bread wanted to make a Fate fighting game, and they made Saber as a proof of concept. Type Moon rejected the idea and said, go make Melty Blood. So instead of scrapping the work they had done, they put Saber in Melty Blood, and the rest was history. Alright, no more Saber. We're done with Saber. I'm never talking about her again. Goodbye. Rin fights using gems, but they're limited and you only get a set amount each round. If she activates her special buff at 300% meter, she gets infinite gems for infinite power. The last Fate game I talked about, Crucis, Fatal Fake, had a similar mechanic, but I chalked that up to coincidence. Archer, like always, steals the show. He can be played as a rushdown character in sword mode and a zoner character in bow mode. A lot like Shiro, but 100 times better. His main gimmick is of course unlimited blade works, but activating it isn't easy. For 50 meter, Archer can recite one part of the unlimited blade works incantation. If he does this 6 times, all he needs to do is fill up his magic circuit, finish the incantation, and unleash unlimited blade works.
I am the bone of my soul. Steel is my body, and fire is my blood. I have created over 1,000 blades, unknown to death, unknown to life. Have withstood pain to create many weapons. Yet those hands will never hold anything. So as I pray, unlimited blade works.
Unlimited blade works is tied into his moveset very well this time. The character is practically built around it, but not defined by it. Activating unlimited blade works isn't the end-all be-all if you can't do it, but if you do pop it off, well, I think this tournament clip shows it perfectly.
Uh-oh, don't get hit, you're gonna be fucking sad. Oh,
One combo, he's one combo to win.
Yeah,
Wow.
This could kill. This could be enough. This could be enough. Oh, drops it.
Oh!
Wake up activation. Fuck it, just do it.
Exact!
Oh!
No!
No!
Oh!
He's dead.
Yes!
No.
Oh!
Oh, he lives.
Come on, Misa.
He's dead.
Oh!
Yeah, it's gonna
Oh!
kill. It's gonna kill.
Oh!
He's dead.
Oh!
Yeah.
Just amazing. Berserker's 300% meter ability gives him 12 hits of super armor, which is lame. It should give him 12 health bars so it could be lore accurate, and I won't stand for this. Gilgamesh is done perfectly in this game. Like Archer, he's got two modes, Sword mode and Gate of Babylon mode, and he can use his chains as well. His whole thing is switching modes. Both have benefits and weaknesses, so it's up to you to decide when to use what to master Gilgamesh, the master of noble phantasms. Kotomine straight up has a raging demon, Akuma style, which I find insanely fitting. He and Rin also share some moveset similarities with their hand-to-hand techniques. Luvier Gelita has one of the best command grabs I've ever seen in any fighting game. It is just so disrespectful. And the best part is, the amount of slapped is determined by how many times you hit left and right on the controller. So if you go absolutely crazy, you're gonna slap the silly out of your opponent. Lastly, I want to spotlight an interesting interaction Bazette can have with her Grail Super. One of her Grail Supers is a counter super that counters supers. Normally, it's a counter super and that's it. Eat 4,000 damage. However, if Lancer uses Gale Bog, a unique animation will play and both players will be damaged. This is just one of a couple unique interactions certain characters have with their Grail Supers, but I chose this one because it really stood out to me. That was just scratching the surface when it comes to the characters in this game. Unfortunately, I can't cover everything or we'd be here all day. Each character is jam-packed with uniqueness, and Aiding really outdid themselves here. We've covered almost everything at this point, but we're not done yet because a year later, Unlimited Codes would be ported to the PlayStation Portable. Fate Unlimited Codes Portable. Really creative name there. Fate Unlimited Codes Portable is exactly what it sounds like, a portable version of Unlimited Codes. Surprisingly, it's extremely faithful to its PlayStation 2 counterpart, likely due in part to the arcade board making it easy to port. The graphics are downgraded of course, but it still looks amazing. The port actually got an English translation, which was shocking considering Type Moon's track record. What's even more surprising is that this version has been balanced specifically for the PlayStation Portable. This includes changing the controls for the worse, motion inputs are gone, and now specials are performed by pressing two directions like forward forward, back back, back forward, etc. This is extremely clunky and you can't change it back to the original arcade controls. It just feels wrong. Strangely enough, all of those advanced competitive mechanics like untech and Tiger Knee canceling, they're system mechanics now. Now everyone's supers are unscaled no matter what, so you don't need untech anymore. And a new mechanic called Instant Jump Cancel basically replaces Tiger Kneeing or majorly downplays its usefulness. I have to give kudos to the devs for this one. Most would just patch and move on, but to take those mechanics and make them features is just so cool. Also, they replaced reflect canceling with this reflect dash. I guess in a way to make things easier, but I don't know if it actually does make things easier, but I can tell that a bunch of combos are going to be insanely different because of it. There are also some miscellaneous changes to characters, and Grail Supers got buffed from 4,000 damage to 7,000 damage, so you're super dead if you get hit. Other than that, it's Fate Unlimited codes on the go. A Fate Go, if you are so inclined. What more can I say? Fate Unlimited codes isn't the most ambitious Fate fighter out there. That award would go to Crucis Fatal Fake with its 2v2 master-servant system that had a high amount of customization. Fate Unlimited codes isn't the most traditional Fate fighter out there either. That would have to go to Fate Sword Dance with its pure 2D fighting action. Despite all of that though, Fate Unlimited Codes is the best Fate fighting game because it has aspects from both while also being its own thing. For what it lacks in ambition and traditional gameplay, it has solid system mechanics with its own unique twists and interesting characters. It's a one-of-a-kind fighting game that only the Fate franchise could help create. Fate Unlimited Codes is one of the best fighting games I've ever covered on this show, and whether you be a fan of fighters or a fan of Fate, you are doing yourself a disservice in not trying this one out. Even so, Fate Unlimited Codes is a weird fighting game. Next time on Type Moon, June. Wait a minute. It looks like we've reached the end. I have so many things that I want to say right now. The amount of support I've gotten throughout these videos has been far greater than I've ever seen, and I am extremely grateful. But I figured I'd save that for a separate finale video. What I can say now is thank you so much for watching this far. This video is insanely long, which is why it took me longer than usual to produce it, but I hope ultimately you enjoyed it. Have a great Type Moon, June, or July, I guess.